modeling rather. Our challenge this year was new. We wanted to have a guest country. This year has been the United Kingdom. Therefore, the person we had to invite was, without a doubt, Mark Bew. We've always used, when we talk about BIM, we've always used a diagram whose author is Mark Bew. So I will ask the organization to show that slide with a diagram. And for many years, we saw this diagram in every single presentation about BIM. So I want to warmly welcome Mark, and I would like all of you to give him a big applause for his work, which is the base for the BIM we know nowadays.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you very much. I realise that there's only me between me and this section and lunch, so I'm going to go fairly quickly and take you through some of the experiences that we've picked up in the UK over the last couple of years. So we're going to talk about level 2, which is where we are now. We're about to hit the mandate in April, and then a bit about the future in terms of level 3. So very quickly. UK construction, 90 billion of spend, about 10% of GDP. It employs 3 million people. It's enormous. If we get this strategy wrong, it'll be catastrophic. Everyone will notice. So we can't afford to get it wrong. It's not a research project. It's not for fun. This is real money, real lives are at stake in this project. We've got a set of targets in our industrial strategy, and the numbers are enormous that we have to achieve. These are the numbers: 33% whole life cost reductions by 2025. You can't do that by squeezing old models. You have to do new things. A digital economy and BIM and digital engineering are all part of that. 50% faster to deliver, 50% lower emissions, and 50% greater exports. These are enormous numbers that we have to achieve through this programme. When I talk about BIM, I don't mean just BIM, I mean everything. I mean the smart cities, I mean smart grids, I mean data. You saw loads and loads of vendor information this morning around the great Autodesk view of life. The one thing that they missed in that presentation is the data underneath. If that data is rubbish, all those pretty pictures mean nothing. And this project is all about maintaining and managing data in a much more effective way throughout the whole of the digital economy and the whole of construction. So you've seen this before, and this is a piece of work I did back in 2008 with a colleague from Lang, and it set out the journey that we're on at the moment around moving from the left-hand side where I started my career back in the 80s, managing paper, all the way through to the far right in 2030, 2025, when we have a complete, hopefully, digital economy, and I'll retire or give it over to someone else to play with. This journey is really important. These steps are really important. If you try and mix a digital economy with paper or graphics with data, you end up with a fruit salad of information. We have to understand how we're managing this information in a much more effective way, which is why we've set up our levels. And level 2 is a really important step that we're going through at the moment, where we've taken 3D geometry and we've attached data to it. Now, the design of level 2 wasn't an accident. We had a question over here about legislation. We deliberately designed level 2 to use existing technology and existing legislation while we learn and start to understand. It's easy to try and guess what's going to happen in the future. We learn more in the first 6 months when we put these projects into the market than we have over the last 10 years talking about it. So the level 2 thing is all about learning, getting an awareness of data and getting people used to using data in their lives. Level 3, yes, we will need to change legislation, but it is possible. We've seen businesses like eBay and Amazon create worldwide markets. If they can do it, so can we. But behind that story is a commercial story. These bubbles represent cost, and you heard Adam a moment ago talking about cost. We spend most of our careers talking about the left-hand side, the capital delivery of projects. But actually, as you go through operations, the 80-20 rule applies. 20% in construction and design, 80% in operations. But look a bit further. 300% of the cost is expended in the operational, functional delivery of the services that asset has to deliver. That's where the real money is. But look a bit further, social. our bills and taxes, the costs of lost opportunity, healthcare, unemployment benefit, where the real money goes. And if we can deliver a better built environment for people, we'll end up with lower costs and better social outcomes. So it's really important we start to understand how that whole piece fits together. Now, UK, we've done three things. We set up a BIM task group, a bit like the EU one that Adam was just talking about, and we did three things. We engaged our clients in terms of government departments, we wrote some standards, and we engaged the supply chain. And as I said earlier, 3 million people is a spectacularly large number of people to talk to. Most people have probably got a couple of thousand friends in their LinkedIn or Facebook accounts. 3 million is a quantum that's incredibly difficult to imagine. Now, with the standards, we've just finished the delivery of our standards. There are 8 documents that have been created. And these are the 8. We haven't got time to go through them at the moment, but there's 8 documents to describe the capital delivery, the operational delivery, the data formats, the classifications. But there's one important one that I'd like to draw your attention to, and that's number 6, the security document. We are creating lots and lots of information about built assets where people congregate, which are also publicly funded and publicly accessed assets. This presents us with a massive risk around people casing and understanding how to behave in perhaps a way that we wouldn't see desirable. We've seen in some of our capitals around Europe this year and last year some really bad behaviour around terrorism and those sorts of things. If we make that information freely available, yes, we need to in terms of collaboration, but we also present other risks. All these documents are available free on the website that's at the bottom of the page. Now, those documents create a set of rules between a push and a pull of the government client and the supply chain. And the pivot of that supply chain is a contract. Now, we heard Ilka talk about behaviours and encouraging people to do things, and all that's true. But the most important thing in construction is the contract. If your employer's information requirements, your BIM requirements aren't in the contract, they won't happen. If they're not competed for and paid for, they won't happen. So these documents and these diagrams show how to implement BIM into your contracts. And without them, frankly, you're unlikely to achieve the outcomes that you really, really want to see. Once we've created that data, we need to do something with it. And these pyramids represent the CapEx and OpEx data pyramids where we can start to share and use that data. And you've heard about model view definitions, the ability to slice data and present it in different ways. So at the bottom of these pyramids, we've got BIM and asset management. Next layer up, we start to see portfolios of information. Next layer up, we cut it by geography. We've got a smart city or a smart grid. That is the same data. We're not going to be recreating data to create a smart city. Engineering construction will deliver that data upwards to give the level of accuracy and tolerance that we need to deliver those services. At the top layer, we see the strategy, in our case, the Treasury. So these processes have been running out in the UK for the last 3 or 4 years, and we've got some good case studies. This is one from the Ministry of Justice. And you see across the top there, there's a layout of the process of delivering a project. It's complicated. You need to go to the level of understanding and sharing of these visions into your teams to make them understood. We've also seen lots of benefits. This lady here runs a prison. She knows nothing about 2D drawings or nothing about building, but we gave her a model and she could start to understand how a building was going to operate in the future. We've also saved lots of money. These curves are available from our Cabinet Office website. The link's on the bottom. And you start to see up to 20% savings in some of our departments. At the right-hand side of that diagram, if you scribe down at the end of the final year, the 14-15 fiscal, it's about £1.2 billion. That's an enormous number. At a political level, for every 5 schools we build, we get one free. Any politician can understand that. That's the kind of message we need to take back. And it has to be that simple. Talking about BIM to a minister or a politician is difficult. One school free, pretty much all of them understand. So that's our level 2 journey. I'm sorry it's a bit quick, but let's move on to level 3. Level 3 has just started its life. The level 3 vision document came out last year. If you go to Digital Built Britain or Google Digital Built Britain, you'll see a copy of that vision document. But what we're starting to look at is whole life management of cost and carbon. We haven't really yet put cost into level 2, and that's really where we need to start to understand. We want to start measuring things. We heard about Internet of Things and that sort of thing this morning. We'll start to look at new commercial models. We'll start to look at how we create this transparent, secure world. And we'll start to look at new services. And I think when you start to see the smart city world looking down and engineering looking up, they have to come together. If they don't, we've lost a massive opportunity around that using data into the future. And we start to see a life that's look a little bit like machines talking to machines, where machines are buildings or roads or people. Because we start to see more and more people with wearables and phones and all these sorts of things gathering information about what we do. We just become part of a machine-to-machine communication network. And if we look at high-performing assets, I'll give you an example here of some data from a very high-performing asset. Anyone want to have a guess where this came from? We haven't got long to do it, I'm afraid. This is data from one lap of a Formula One car going round Monaco, just up the coast. This is probably the highest performing, quickest developing asset in the world. With buildings, you can imagine how much data we're collecting and how much we're learning from this information. So from our high-performing assets, we're seeing lots of data coming out, creating feedback. We're starting to see massive growth in the market of mobile and remote health monitoring. And you can start to see those curves. Millions and millions of people will be using devices, wearable devices, to measure their health. But what do we know about this? You're right. Nada. We know nothing about a built environment. Absolutely nothing. And so create all these lovely point cloud fly-throughs, to be honest, is bordering on pointless, frankly. We need to start to understand what's inside those assets. How much carbon are they using? How many people are in there? What's happening to those people in there? How are they living? How are they feeling? Because that's what social outcomes are all about, and that's what the built environment is there to create much smarter and better outcomes for people in the future. So if we go back to level 2 and look at our data, we hold some data, and we start at the beginning, we work our way across, and at the end we demolish the asset, maybe 40, 50 years' time. We've learnt nothing about that asset in its lifetime. But as we start to, on the right-hand side, gather some data through our IP, Internet of Things, all those sorts of things, we start to look at how we can use that data. So one of the things we're doing at level 3 is we're going to put that performance data into its own pyramid. And you can see as the data comes around, the process comes around, we design, we build, we commission, we operate, we measure. And once we measure, we can complete a feedback loop. And for the first time, a building can become part of a learning environment, a machine-to-machine learning environment. And that's really important in terms of making level 3 work into the future. But buildings don't live in isolation. There are thousands and thousands and millions of buildings all across different sectors. And as you go across the Z-axis, you start to see different sectors talking to each other, from energy, transport, water, and those sorts of things. They're all dependent on each other. They have to understand what's going on. And it's really important because we're about to build a big railway line from the top to the bottom of the UK. And one of the biggest restrictions we have on delivering that asset isn't money, it's power. We're miles behind on our nuclear power station rollout strategy. We're going to run out of power in 5 years. And we're about to build a machine that's going to start to consume lots more information. So we're starting to see how that information can create, in effect, that orange area in the middle, which is an analytics zone, an apps zone. And the apps zone is where we're going to see the biggest growth, around 2,000% compound annual growth rate in that area. And already we're seeing apps on the market for care of the elderly, where the elderly can have an app on their phone and they can order their prescriptions, they can download their monitoring information, those sorts of things. We're seeing apps for the emergency services, where they're geospatially using BIM information to share around the process. We're seeing crowdsourcing apps for potholes and for lamps that don't work. So lots and lots of different information starting to come together. But also at a macro level, we're starting to see some much bigger apps. 3D printing of houses, you saw it earlier. Without a doubt, this will be happening over here very, very soon. It's a complete obvious thing to do, all driven from data. But also virtual reality, holographics. At the bottom is a head-up display from a Falcon bomber, which I worked on back in the 80s. And each of those head-up displays cost about £3 million. A set of Microsoft HoloLens glasses is about $100. It's the same technology. but the price points come down. So construction can start to access that information and use it in a much more effective way. So that's a very, very quick glance at the UK market and what we're doing with BIM in level 2 and level 3. Thank you very much. Gracias.